Hey everybody, I hope you're having a good day. So in this video, I wanted to explore the different possibilities, the different permutations of how Argentina, one of the best teams in the world and World Cup favorites, perpetual World Cup favorites, can miss out on the World Cup in Russia next summer. And I wrote down some notes here, and I think it's relatively straightforward. It's simple. So just sit back and enjoy the video. I'll explore all the different possible situations that would have to unfold for Argentina to not qualify for Russia. First, let's take a look at the current standings in the table. If you can excuse my handwriting. So Brazil's at the top with 37 points. Uruguay way below them with 27 points. Brazil way ahead of the pack by at least 10 points from the next team closest to them. Colombia right under Uruguay with 26 points. Peru in fourth with 24. Argentina in fifth with 24. Chile in sixth with 23. Paraguay in seventh with 21. Ecuador in eighth with 20. Bolivia in ninth with 13th, and Venezuela in 10th, last place with 8 points. So these are the current standings. So scenario one here would be Argentina losing both of their games. And just to run through here pretty much just quickly, pretty much what this scenario would entail would be on the final two match days, on match days 17 and 18, Argentina losing at home to Peru, which would be a disaster for Argentina, coupled by a few other results going against them, such as a Paraguay victory on the road against Colombia. I'll get back to that in a moment. The Bolivia versus Brazil game not really holding any impact. Here why I wrote down the initials NA, meaning non-applicable. Venezuela versus Uruguay. Uruguay getting a win, thus pulling ahead on the table even further on 30 points. Chile versus Ecuador. Really, any result here hurts Argentina if they lose to Peru. Because if Ecuador gets a win, Ecuador goes to 23 points, one behind Argentina. If Chile gets a win at home, Chile goes ahead of Argentina and goes to 26 points to Argentina's 24. And even if both teams tie, as I have a check mark next to both names, Ecuador would go to 21 points and Chile would go to 24. And Chile would have a decent chance of going ahead of Argentina on goal difference, meanwhile Ecuador being only 3 points behind Argentina. So the best possible result for Argentina for the Chile-Ecuador game, if Argentina loses to Peru, would be if Chile and Ecuador tie each other. But if any of these two teams get a win, it's pretty bad for Argentina. Now, this little note I made at the bottom, note that Colombia win versus Paraguay and a Chile or Ecuador win are also bad for Argentina. This is just to show you the different combinations possible here. So even if Colombia beats Paraguay and Paraguay stays at 21 points, which is below Argentina at 24, you still have other teams in the group, such as Uruguay and Colombia, who would be pulling ahead, starting to pull away from Argentina. And then on match day 18, again, Doomsday scenario, the worst possible scenario, scenario one for Argentina, is losing both games. Losing on the road in Ecuador would pretty much eliminate Argentina. They would stay at 24 points, while Ecuador would most likely go ahead of them. Uruguay again pulling ahead with a win over Bolivia. Even worse for Colombia would be a Peru victory at home versus Colombia. The Paraguay-Venezuela game would be mostly wouldn't really matter that much, but if Paraguay is still alive in the final match day, it would mean a lot if Paraguay gets a result on the road in Colombia and couples it with a win at home versus Venezuela, because they get 4 points at least, while Argentina loses both of their games. Paraguay go to 25 points. So yeah. And then Brazil versus Chile. It would be really bad for Argentina here if Chile gets a result on the road against Brazil, either a draw or a win. So the worst case for Argentina in scenario 1 after the completion of South American qualifying would see Uruguay, Peru, Paraguay, Colombia, Chile, and maybe even Ecuador ahead of them. The worst case scenario for Argentina would be for them to finish as low as 8th place in the standings. And again, scenario 1, the worst case scenario, losing both of their games to Peru at home and Ecuador on the road. And it's not totally unfeasible considering the form and momentum that Peru are in, as well as the fact that Ecuador are not an easy side to play against on the road in high altitude in Quito, despite the fact that Ecuador are in really poor form at the moment. Scenario 2 here would see Argentina tie both of their 2 remaining games, as they've tied their last 2 previous games, both at home and on the road. So here, a draw against Peru, coupled with a win for Paraguay on the road, and again, the Bolivia-Brazil game being non-applicable. Uruguay cementing their lead with a win over Venezuela, and any kind of result, really, between Chile and Ecuador would be really undesirable for Argentina. Again, I cannot stress that Argentina dropping points at home to Peru automatically makes whatever the result is between Chile and Ecuador undesirable for Argentina, whether that's a win for Chile, a win for Ecuador, or a tie between both teams. And then, especially if it's a win for Chile, because Chile then goes ahead of Argentina on the table. And then a draw subsequently on the road in Ecuador, coupled with a Uruguay extending their lead even further, a win for Peru at home versus Colombia, a win for Paraguay against Venezuela, and Chile getting a result on the road in Brazil, again, would be very much so a disaster for Argentina. Now, the whole result between the Colombia-Paraguay games and the Chile-Ecuador games, it really doesn't matter what the results there in those matches are if Argentina drops points at home to Peru. Again, they drop points at home to Peru, pretty much any result between Colombia and Paraguay and Chile and Ecuador puts Argentina in an undesirable situation. But it would be worse for Argentina if Paraguay pulls off the unthinkable and gets 2 wins both on the road in Colombia and at home against Venezuela. What would happen here would be Brazil far and away group winners, Uruguay in second. You would have Peru come in third, Chile or Paraguay, one of them coming in fourth and fifth. Then Colombia coming in, I believe, sixth. And Argentina would finish in seventh, behind Colombia on goal difference, eliminated. The third scenario here would be 1 tie and 1 loss. One win and 1 loss. That's right. Even if Argentina wins one of their 2 remaining games, they could still be eliminated. Here's how. Let's say Argentina beats Peru, right? Colombia gets a result on the road against, Paraguay gets a result on the road against Colombia, win. Again, the Bolivia-Brazil game is non-applicable. Uruguay racks up the score on Venezuela, extend their lead in the margins, in the rankings, in the standings, And then you have Chile getting a win over Ecuador. The next match day, Ecuador beating Argentina on the road. Argentina losing their last game. Uruguay again, extending their lead in the table, pulling ahead of, everyone really. Over Bolivia, a win at home. Peru beating Colombia. Paraguay beating Venezuela. And Brazil and Chile getting a result from this game. A draw, even a win, would be a disaster for Argentina. Now, note, just like in scenario 1, a Colombia win over Paraguay would be just as bad for Argentina. I'm just using one example. This is what the standings would look like. you'd have a four-way tie. You'd have Brazil as group winners, Uruguay in second with 33 points, but then you would have Peru, Argentina, Chile, and Paraguay. All four of these teams level on 27 points each. And it would come down to goal difference, goals scored, and head-to-head, etc. to determine who finishes in what order. And in the worst case scenario, since this video is making that, you would have Argentina finishing as low as 6th place, putting them outside the playoff spot. Now, you can also switch this around as well by giving Colombia, because in this scenario, Colombia would be eliminated. You can give Colombia a victory, giving them at 29 points, which would take Paraguay down to 24. But I believe Argentina would still be in 6th place in the worst case scenario for scenario 3. So what's the conclusion? The conclusion from these 3 scenarios is this. Follow me here. In scenario 1, the worst case scenario, Argentina can finish in 8th place with 2 losses. The absolute worst case scenario, which puts them well below the minimum requirement of finishing in the top 5 to have a chance of qualifying. Scenario 2 will put them in 7th place with 2 draws. And scenario 3, the least worst case scenario, will put them in 6th place but still eliminated with 1 win and 1 loss. Of course, there are more scenarios that see Argentina finish pretty much almost anywhere in the table except the top spot, which is occupied by Brazil. But these are the 3 most dramatic ones, in my opinion, that would see Argentina directly eliminated. The worst case scenario would see them finish in 8th place out of 10. The middle road one would 7th. And the least worst case scenario in 6th, but not even getting the right to play New Zealand. So leave a comment below, like, subscribe. If you thought this video was confusing, let me know. If it was clear enough and it was simple, also let me know. I appreciate any and all kind of feedback. I'll see you guys in my next video, which will, God willing, come later on tonight. So until then, have a good day, much love, and peace out.